On behalf of everyone at the press, I want to start by expressing our gratitude to all of our donors who make everything we do possible. This includes our hardworking board of directors, whom I know are out there watching tonight, and who are joined by generous funders like the National Endowment for the Arts, the Hawthornden Foundation, For Culture, and the Seattle Office of Arts and Culture. To all of those who give to Copper Canyon Press, thank you. Truly, thank you. And if you're not already a donor to the press, I cannot stress how critical this time is. We really need your support. After severe recent cutbacks from some of our traditional funders, and with attention going necessarily to current political campaigns, support for the arts is dangerously low. And yet, it is our poets who see us through these times of challenge. The artists and poets have always been at the forefront of our shared national and global concerns. We turn to them and to poetry in times of crisis and celebration. When the world seems crazed and our uncertainty is inarticulable, that's what we have poetry for. Poets help us navigate the uncertainty. And just as we turn to poetry to sustain our humanity, Copper Canyon is now turning to you, the individuals who have sustained us for over 50 years. You are the press's lifeblood. You are the ones who give poetry a home, a place to wrestle with the uncertainty of our times on our collective behalf, and to celebrate what makes us human. You'll be given multiple opportunities to make your gift to Copper Canyon Press this evening, and particularly in support of the ESSENTIAL C.D. Wright. You can make your gift by clicking on links that will appear in our chat, or by using this QR code that appears on your screen now. I also want to let you know that we have a very special treat near the end of the evening, so I really hope you can stay with us for the entirety of the coming hour. Before our first guest reads, I want to go over a few quick logistics to make sure we're all comfortable in this shared space. If it would help you to see closed captioning, you can enable captions at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We will be live streaming this reading simultaneously to Facebook, and the event will be recorded and shared on our website. You can send a note of encouragement to tonight's readers, or just say hello by clicking on the chat icon down at the bottom of your screen. I also want to invite you at any time during the evening to drop a note into the chat, perhaps when a line or phrase or image from a poem really finds its place in you, and you can let us know. Or if you have a question, I will do my absolute best to read and acknowledge your input. In the meantime, I want to also take a moment to thank our team running tech and logistics tonight. Many of us may not realize that there are lots of people behind the scenes making everything work. I want to express my personal gratitude to those colleagues of mine for their care and good work. So a bit about C.D. Wright and the reason we're here tonight. C.D. Wright was critically important to the shaping of Copper Canyon Press over the past 30 years. She first came to the press in 1996 with the manuscript for Deep Step Come Shining, a remarkable, transformative book that encouraged an aesthetic shift both at Copper Canyon Press and in the literary world at large. Working alongside her on that first book with Copper Canyon, which was one of my own first acquisitions, she encouraged me, as an editor, to take risks. I would quickly learn how deeply held was her moral compass. Her fierce belief in the work of poetry and her humility in the face of the art of poetry was infectious. Her commitment to taking risks, the same that she encouraged me to take, her commitment to breaking boundaries and reconsidering what's considered acceptable, opened Copper Canyon Press up to a diverse aesthetic and cultural presence that has made it what it is today as a press. From Deep Step Come Shining to One Big Self, The Prisoners of Louisiana, or from One with Others to Casting Deep Shade, C.D. created a new investigative docupoetics, a poetry of witness and protest, a poetry of wit and deep regard, a poetry that has changed how poetry was written and read. Her good friend Arthur Sze has had much the same effect on the press and on poetry, and we're going to ask him to start tonight and talk and read a little bit. Arthur is an award-winning poet, translator, and editor who has published 11 books of original poetry. His works have been translated into 15 languages and include The Glass Constellation, New and Collected Poems, which was the winner of the 2024 Science and Literature National Book Foundation Award, the book Sightlines, which won the National Book Award for Poetry, and Compass Rose, a Pulitzer Prize finalist. A recipient of the 2022 Ruth Lilly Poetry Prize for Lifetime Achievement from the Poetry Foundation, Arthur serves as a Chancellor Emeritus at the Academy of American Poets and is Professor Emeritus at the Institute of American Indian Arts. He was the first poet laureate of Santa Fe, New Mexico. Arthur, please read us some poems.
Thank you, Michael. It's such a pleasure to be here this evening to celebrate C.D. Wright's poetry. And as I was thinking about her poems, I jotted down some adjectives, some phrases that came to mind when I think about C.D.'s poetry. Audacious, visionary, quirky, recalcitrant, eclectic, gritty, elliptical, sounding like no one else. So those were like a cluster of words and phrases that came to me. And in the short time I have, I want to share 3 poems with you. I want to trace an arc through 3 early books. And this first poem is called Tours. A girl on the stairs listens to her father beat up her mother. Doors bang. She comes down in her nightgown. The piano stands there in the dark like a boy with an orchid. She plays what she can, then she turns the lamp on. Her mother's music is spread out on the floor like brochures. She hears her father running through the leaves. The last black key she presses down makes no sound. Someone putting their tongue where their tooth had been. It's a really powerful early poem of C.D.'s that I think is really striking. And part of what I want to do is show how her sense of poetry enlarges very quickly over her first few books. This next poem was written after the death of Frank Stanford, and it's called Scratch Music. How many threads have I broken with my teeth? How many times have I looked at the stars and felt ill? Time here is divided into before and since your shuddering in 1978. I remember hanging onto the hood of the big fendered Olds with a mess of money in my purse. Call that romance. Some memory precedes you. When I wanted lederhosen because I'd read Heidi, and how I wanted my folks to build a fallout shelter so I could arrange the cans, and coveting mother's muskrat. I remember college and being in Vista. I asked the librarian in Banks, the state's tomato capital, if she had any Black literature, and she said they used to have Little Black Sambo, but the white children tore out pages and wrote ugly words inside. Someone said, if I didn't like Banks, I should go to Moscow. I said, come on, let's go outside and shoot the hoop. I've got a Jones to beat your butt. I haven't changed. Now, if I think of the Earth's origins, I get vertigo. When I think of its death, I fall. I've picked up a few things. I know if you want songbirds, plant berry trees. If you don't want birds, buy a rubber snake. I remember that town with the Alcoa plant I toured. The manager kept referring to the workers as Alcoans. I thought of hundreds of flexible metal beings bent over assemblages. They sparked. What would I do in Moscow? I have these dreams. Relatives loom over my bed. We should put her to sleep, Lonnie says. Go home, old girl. Go home, my aunt says. Why should I go home before her, I want to say? But I am bereft. So how is life in the other world? Do you get the news? Are you allowed a pet? But I wanted to show you how I've grown, what I know. I keep my bees far from the stable. They can't stand how horses smell. And I know sooner or later an old house will need a new roof. And more than 6 years have whistled by since you blew your heart out like the porch light. Reason and meaning don't step into another lit spot like a well-meaning stranger with a hat. And mother's mother, who has lived in the same house 10 times 6 years, told me, we don't know we had termites until they swarmed. Then we had to pull up the whole floor. Too late, no more. You know the poem. But you bastard, you picked up a gun in winter as if it were a hat and you were leaving a restaurant, full, weary, and thankful to be spending the evening with no one. There's about 5 years difference between scratch music and tours, and you can see how CD's poetry is opening up in an amazing way. And the third and last poem I want to share is from another book, String Light, about 5 years later. And in this poem, to me, which is a landmark piece, it's as if anything and everything can now enter into a CD Wright poem, or dust. I am your ancestor. You know next to nothing about me. There is no reason for you to imagine the rooms I occupied or my heavy hair, not the faint vinegar smell of me, or the rubber damp of Forrest and I coupling on the landing en route toward detached day. You didn't know my weariness, error, incapacity. I was the poet of shadow work in towns with quarter-inch phone books, of failed roadside zoos, the poet of yard eggs and sharpening shops, jobs at the weapons plant and the Maybelline factory on the penitentiary road, a poet of spiderwort and jacks in the pulpit, hollyhocks against the tool shed, an unsmiling dark blonde, the one with a trowel in her handbag. I dig up protected and private things. That sort I was. My graves went undecorated and my churches abandoned. This wasn't planned, but practice. I was the poet of short-tailed cats and yellow-line paint, of satellite dishes and Peterbilt trucks, red man chewing tobacco, triple hut cream soda, also of dirt daubers, night crawlers, Martin houses, honey, and whetstones from the Novaculite uplift. I had registered dogs for sale, rocks, dung, and straw. I was a poet of hummingbird hives, along with red-headed stepbrothers, the poet of good walking shoes, a necessity in vernacular parts, and push mowers. The rumor that I was once seen sleeping in a refrigerator box is false. He was a brother who hated me. Nor was I the one lunching at the governor's mansion. I didn't work off a grid or prime the surface if I could get off without it. I made simple music out of sticks and string. On side B of me, experimental guitar, night repairs, and suppers such as this. You could count on me to make a bad situation worse, like putting liquid makeup over a passion mark. I never raised your rent or anybody else's, by God. Never said I loved you. The future gave me chills. I used the medium to say, arise, arise, and come together. Free your children. Come on, everybody. Let's start with Baltimore. Believe me, I am not being modest when I admit my life does not bear repeating. I agreed to be the poet of one life, one death alone. I have seen myself in the black car. I have seen the retreat of the black car. So in those three poems, you can see what a huge trajectory C.D. Wright has launched from one book to the next, which will lead into her book-length works, her really prime and fertile, groundbreaking work. But I wanted you just to see, to me, those three poems with that sense of music, really exciting to see that kind of expanse and risk and a sense of language as a kind of string light. I want to turn now and personalize it and share with you a photo from Napa Valley Writers Conference in 2010. I have fond memories of that conference. CD, Forrest, Brenda, and I were all teaching at Napa Valley Writers Conference. And this was at the very end of the week-long session, and someone brought a cockatoo. And it was just, again, something that was totally unexpected, but surprising and wonderful, and just seemed like a fitting end. When I think of C.D. Wright, I think of many hikes and walks. I remember driving C.D. and Forrest to Chaco Canyon, to walking through T-shaped doorways into the great open space of the Casa Rinconada, the open kiva at Chaco Canyon. And the last memory I have, and maybe the most moving, is spending a morning with C.D. in Providence, Rhode Island. She took me from cemetery to cemetery to cemetery, and we did not look at a single gravestone. We looked at these gigantic, enormous, amazing beech trees. And that sense of life and flowering was just amazing from place to place. She was working on her long book, Casting Deep Shade. And I remember at one point we talked about other trees, and the dawn redwood came up, and she said it was like, that tree was like having the light, the beginning light of the world in its leaves. And I felt like in her poetry, it's like the beginning light of all things that's there. I'll stop here.
Thank you, Arthur. I feel like I've failed you as your editor, as I neglected to even mention that your new book, Into the Hush, is forthcoming this spring. I really can't wait to share all those new poems with everyone. You know, as we all know at the press, it's such a gorgeous book, and it's great to work with you over these many years and into this new book. And then quickly looking through all the names that I'm seeing online, I see a number of friends and students of CDs as well as other Copper Canyon poets. So again, thank all of you for joining us. I can't wait to hear our next reader, Brenda Hillman. Brenda was long one of CD's most reliable and beloved co-conspirators, traveling the world together while establishing their voices as utterly new and necessary. Brenda is the author of 11 collections from Wesleyan University Press, the most recent of which are Extra Hidden Life, Among the Days, and In a Few Minutes Before Later. Her book Three Talks, Metaphor, Metonymy, Meaning and Mystery, Magic and Morality, I think I got that right, is recently out from University of Virginia Press. I'm sorry I've not read it yet. I can't wait to. I think it came out just last month. She has additionally edited At Your Feet, the poetry of the Brazilian poet Ana Cristina Cesar, which she co-translated with her mother, Helen Hillman, as well as co-editing The Grand Permission, New Writings on Poetics and Motherhood, which she co-edited with Patricia Dinstfree. Again, I hope I got that right. Her awards include the Los Angeles Times Book Prize in Poetry and the Morton Doan Zabel Award, listed by Poets and Writers as among the 50 most inspiring writers worldwide. Hillman brings together a poetics of ecology, spiritual inquiry, social justice, and formal invention. A former chancellor of the Academy of American Poets, she lives with her husband Robert Haas in the San Francisco Bay Area, where she is poetry director at the Community of Writers and is professor emerita at St. Mary's College of California. Welcome, Brenda.
Thank you, Michael. I found a little thing that I'd written. I wrote a lot of little paragraphs for periodicals after CD passed, but I will read a few sentences from one of them. Our friendship began long ago in Cody's books in Berkeley. I introduced myself and she said, "I didn't know your hair was that color." And I fell in love with her, my slightly older, brave sister. We took a few trips together, including a life-changing trips to Libya. I'll show some pictures of that trip with our beloved men. We egged each other on with ornery, iconoclastic tidbits and irreverent remarks from our Southern fathers, punctuated frequently by bullshit. She gave me some Venus de Milo socks and a bright orange umbrella. She was capable of deep literary loves and fidelities that never faltered, never felt weird even once. Rereading her astonishing books now, I note how each page of her writing provides a window into a complete vision. I have a long list of adjectives like Arthur's, but I'll save that for our discussion if we have time. I'm going to read from this Further Adventures with You. She wrote lots of prose that was very significant about her poetics and about the poetics of others. In my work, I'm led by my senses, but I understand practical matters. I am neither interested in preserving nor exercising the poetry of the hills. There are luminous, albeit terrible facts I must simply transcribe. I, the scribe, others transform. But on the same point, I submit you have to strike down your own mythology about yourself, your loves, your ravishing and atavistic homeland. I'm interested in the vision beyond this confrontation. Boundaries of illumination between the created, the recreated, the newly gleamed, the as yet incomprehensible. Speaking for myself, this scribbling saves me from missing a minute of what would otherwise go unspecified, unstyled. Writing is a risk and a trust. The best of it lies yonder. My linguistic skills expand on the horizon. So does the horizon. It's impossible to say how wonderful it was to be comparing notes with CD about things that we were working on and our crankiness about the literary world, and especially the categories, the sort of pain in the ass categories that people try to put you into. I'm going to read a couple pages from Deep Step Comes Shining, which in Forrest and my class, I spent a long time talking about this book, but I'm going to read a couple of my favorite pages here. It's from the second big section. Everyone in their car needs love, car love, meat love, money love, pass with care. Deep step, baby, deep step. The bone man said he would take the blinded to the river with a mirror, and then what? The bone man said he would take the blinded into the darkened room and put a hot herb poultice on their sightless face, mulling for this, mulling for that. We called it flannel. Then leave them there. The baby sister of the color photographer had a baby girl in the hills, born with scooped out sockets in the head, born near the tracks they sprayed with Agent Orange. The railroad's denial, ditto the army's. They would have been blue, the eyes she did not have, blue as the chicory in yonder ditch. We see a little further now and a little further still. She said her lights would be on, and they were. Groping around the sleeping house in our gowns, peeping into the unseen. Beautiful things fill every vacancy. Ripcord lounges up on the right. 32-degree beer. A little past the package store. Suddenly I have the feeling of a great victory, a delirious brilliance. All around in here it used to be so pretty. The bone man's bobcat, its untamable eyes in the night. Did you know a ghost has hair? A ghost has hair, that's right. Peaches and fireworks and red ants. Now do you know where we are? I boarded with a suitcase of Blackbeard fireworks. I had forgotten about the Unabomber. They shook me down, confiscated my sparklers, my Roman candles, my lady fingers. Make a left just beyond Pull-Tight Road. The land obtained in exchange for 2 blind horses. This land became known as Wren's. Merely listening. After the rain, the trees smell so pleased. They hail sheep, naked atop the sheets. We leave the deck for the lawn. The grass is licking our feet. A semicircle of chairs opens a parenthesis. In the direction of the light source. We see a little farther now, and a little farther still, peeping into the unseen. And then I'll read the first page of, I just second and third and quadruple what Arthur said about the way she grew from book to book. I guess I don't necessarily think of, I think that she was just doing different things. Count your fingers, count your toes, count your nose holes, count your blessings, count your stars, lucky or not. Count your loose change, count the cars at the crossing, count the miles to the state line, count the ticks you pulled off the dog, count your calluses, count your shells, count the points on the antlers, count the New Jack's keys, count your cards, cut them again. From One Big South. And 2 little pieces from her book published posthumously by Copper Canyon, Shallcross, which I think is a really amazing book. We talked a little bit about how single short poems should stand on their own, even if they are part of a sequence. And it's something I think a lot of writers forget, but C.D. did not forget it. So her short poems all stand up by themselves. Poem Without Angel Food. Well, a great many things have been said in the oven of hours. We have not been shaken out of the magnolias. Today was another hard day, and tomorrow will be harder. Well, that sounds like our gong. But we'll have the boy's birthday, and we will have music and cake. Well, I will think only good thoughts and go up and talk to the rock. And then I'll close with the last page of the long poem at the end of the book, which I think is just a blow-away great poem. I'm sure there is a word in English. There is always a word. What is that low-flying, short-winged bird? Your mother would know, even if she can't call up its name. They fly alone, notwithstanding. They are abundant, but they fly only the breadth of a field, traveling silently. It is early, yet you said I'm going back to my study. A hand reaching toward your half-turned head, pale sun filtering through the cloud floor, passing over a tangle of tensions and angularities, a silver band, suddenly visible in the grass, the perennials by the shed, identifying themselves by vibration alone, the light discolored as candelabrum from a preceding life, your Juno-esque hand turning the handle to a door carved from a tree of tomorrows. Don't shut it, I said, we lack for nothing. Indissolubly connected across the lines of our lives, the once, the now, the then, and again. C.D. Wright. I have a few pictures. Okay, so this is a wonderful picture of her taken in the 80s by Forrest, of course. Just adorable. And the next one, I think, is the parrot again. Should I? Oh, there it is. Yeah, there's the parrot again. Arthur and I both had the same picture. I loved that cockatoo. And so here we are after one of our hikes after the Napa conference. We would go up to Calistoga and take mud baths and take a hike and then take a mud bath. and it was it was a beautiful vista. And then the rest of the photos I'm providing are from our trip to Libya. It was really fun to travel with Forrest and CD to Libya. We were the poets invited there by under the Gaddafi. I think we were the only American poets invited under Gaddafi. And here she is with her T-shirt on her head with on the camel. And there she is again. It was during a sandstorm. So it was, you had to have the T-shirt on your head. It was at the edge of the Sahara. And then here she is in the Roman ruins at the edge of the Mediterranean. And there's a wonderful picture. I think, Forrest, I think you had told her to look like the statue or something. Anyway, I have a lot more to say, but I'm looking forward to hearing Forrest. Thank you, Copper Canyon.
Thank you, Brenda, and I'm sorry about that technical difficulty. I've had the great pleasure of working with Forrest Gander now over the course of several books, and it's always a beautiful learning experience. He's so generous and gentle with his time. Together, we've gone for this project, for the Essential CD, we've gone through mountains of her files and documents, and we've found poems, old and new, and have had great conversations about what to include and what to save for later. We didn't want to duplicate her selected poems and steal away, and yet we didn't want to leave too much out. And so in the Essential, you're going to get a beautiful and well-considered selection of poems that we both feel are essential. And that also includes poems that have never been seen before. So Forrest Gander was born in the Mojave Desert and grew up in Virginia. He's a writer and translator with degrees in geology and English literature. In fact, I remember when I first visited Forrest and CD, their dining room table had a glass section within the center of it with all the fossils and gems and what have you that I think Forrest had found in his work as a geologist. But I'm sorry for that aside. Among his recent books are Be With, which of course was the winner of the 2019 Pulitzer Prize, and Core Samples from the World, a Pulitzer and National Book Critics Award finalist. His translations are numerous and include Then Come Back, The Lost Neruda, Fungus Skull Eye Wing, the selected poems of Alfonso Daquino, and Pinholes in the Night, which is a great anthology of essential poems from Latin America. All of those are from Copper Canyon Press. He's the Adele Kellenberg Seaver Professor Emeritus of Literary Arts and Comparative Literature at Brown University and lives in Northern California. His new book, Mojave Ghost, is just out with new directions, and I think you'll be on tour, on the road touring for it the coming weeks. Correct? Forrest, I look forward to hearing you read some of CD's poems to us tonight and to getting to the question and answer after that. Welcome, Forrest.
Thank you, Michael. Working with you is indeed a learning experience, but it's me who's doing the learning. For 35 years, I lived with CD, and during that time, I can say with utter honesty that she was not for 1 minute uninteresting or uninterested. She is the most fascinating person I've known. Her passions were extensive and ever expanding. She was given to lake swimming and hiking, to trees and plants, which she would casually name as she passed them, both the Latin name and the common one. She fell in love with Mexico. She convinced me to fall in love with Arkansas. She was a distracted driver, except in New York City, where she woke up and out-hustled the taxis. She was irrevocably devoted to our child, Brecht. She was committedly amorous. She poured herself into friendships and somehow invented time while directing a writing program, raising a child, running a press, to intensify those friendships. She took her role as a professor seriously, was unflattering and honest with her students. And when others bowed out, she reluctantly took on more and more at work. I know many times it seemed as though she was pulling the load for everyone. But it wasn't until after her death, as I collected her folders and heard from friends and strangers, that I realized quite how vastly she gave herself to others. I thought I'd known, but I didn't. She was constantly advocating, taking the initiative, championing those who would never even know what she'd done on their behalf, and somehow she wrote her books. C.D. was one of the most influential and vital North American poets of her generation and mine. Her New York Times obituary noted that she was so uniquely original that she constituted a school of exactly one. Although she was known as a lyric and an elliptical poet, she drew from narrative and documentary poetics to write books defined by their wry humor, their ethical orientation, and their inventive formal strategies. She grew up, as most of you know, in the Ozarks of Arkansas as the daughter of a country judge and a court reporter. There, she picked up a keen vernacular voice that came to characterize much of her writing, even as her work became more restlessly innovative and her diction, syntax, and formal strategies expanded, infused by her sophisticated intellectual bent and an exuberance for lexical particularity. Since she was raised in the house of a court reporter and a judge whose idol was Abraham Lincoln, it may not seem a stretch that C.D.'s constitution was ethical and empathic to the core. Think about the poems you've just heard read tonight by Arthur and Brenda. As C.D.'s biographer Jennifer Steinnorth notes, in C.D.'s poems, and especially in the book-length works, One Big Self and One with Others, C.D. decenters her own experience, privileging that of others, particularly those suffering. However, she regularly makes herself vulnerable to the gaze of her audience, acknowledging her authorial fallibility. She never modified her innate sense of right and wrong in order to let something pass in a social situation. But that didn't mean that she was pious. In fact, one of her most immediately apparent qualities in argument or casual conversation was her quick sense of humor. The essential C.D. was a woman who would speak her mind, her blue-gray eyes sparking with an unrehearsed, unpretentious directness so rare it was disarming. Should we look at a few photos? This is C.D. Soon after we met, we got a grant from the NEA for Lost Roads Publishers and thought that if we moved to Mexico, we could still publish the 5 books and probably live for 30 years. It didn't turn out that way because I got sick, but this is C.D. and the place that we stayed in Mexico, in Dolores Hidalgo. Their famous collarbones. That's Brecht, who is pretending to be taller than me, and in fact is, and C.D. and I at our house in Barrington. One summer when Brecht was a baby, we rented a house in Hogjaw, which of course would be in Arkansas, near a town called Lead Hill, where I was just a few days ago with my son and with Jennifer Steinnorth. This is this is mostly what we did. All of us, we slept, and we got some writing done. C.D., I love this look, the slight consternation, like, what is that horse thinking? And this was on our first trip with Francis Mays and Ed Kleinschmidt Mays to Tuscany, after which Frances came to write her famous book, Under the Tuscan. CD at our house in Barrington, in front of a sculpture, a sculptural light made by Brenda Gander, Wright, and her head is blocking a drawing of his also on the wall. It's a photograph of CD with her parents. That's Ernie and that's Aline Wright, and this was taken in Arkansas. This photograph was taken in January 2016, just a little before our return home and her death. I had the opportunity to set up a series of readings in the Gabriel Mistral Center, and I asked CD to come down with me, and we besides the readings that I organized, and CD, that was CD's last reading, we were there with Eiko Yamada, who used to be Eiko in coma, but now is performing on her own. And CD went to every single performance that Eiko gave there, which was every day for several hours, and developed a friendship, deep friendship and admiration for her. This photograph was taken by Amish Trivedi, and it's typical of how CD was with her students. She often invited them to picnics and to swims near our house in Barrington. This is at our house, and she's meeting with the students. Thanks, Amish, for taking this photo. CD in Sweden. My family comes from Sweden. I went to meet some of them for the first time, and CD came with me. She was a star in Sweden. A book of hers is very popular, translated into Swedish there. And this is a place where we had given a reading together. CD and I returned to San Francisco and to the hill where we first loved each other. And I lived on one side of Potrero Hill, and she lived on the other side of Potrero Hill. This is standing in front of my apartment when we returned in 2012. CD and I, in 2015, the summer, at an installation in Slovenia by the poet artist Primož Kučnik. And though this was in the 90s, same problem. No a la guerra fuera tropas israelíes de Palestina, end the massacre in Gaza. CD loved Mexico and developed many deep friendships there. This is CD in it's the Valley of the Moon, and this was the summer of 2015, and we were hiking. We did a lot of hiking in San Francisco. CD in Brecht. I was thinking this was his graduation. It's around the time of his graduation from high school. And one of the last photos I have from CD, we were exploring a place she made me swear I would never go to without her, and I haven't. It's near a place called Heart's Desire in California. Back to you, Michael.
Thank you, Forrest. We're going to come back here in a moment to the question and answers. And, we may go a little bit over, but I hope everybody will stay on because we have a really special surprise at the end. And before we go to question and answers, I want to ask you to make a contribution to Copper Canyon Press, all of you who are out there. In addition to the forthcoming book, The Essential C.D. Wright, we will be, over the course of the next couple of years, publishing more work by C.D., including previously unpublished poems and small editions that have been long unavailable. As I mentioned before, Forrest and I have been going through mountains of files and documents, combing through drafts and uncollected poems, and we can't wait to share them with you, both in the Essential C.D. Wright as well as other volumes. Your support, though, is what will make it possible for us to keep CD's voice essential long into the future. So please have a look at our donation levels, have a look at our donation page, and give in any amount that might work for you. So to maybe give you a small taste of some of the unpublished works, I thought I'd hog the microphone a little more and share one of the poems with you. This is an unpublished poem called Against the Encroaching Grays. Against the Encroaching Grays. I held up the femur of a grasshopper. Some blue air fell over me. What I want is less clear to me now than it was then. To be loved to the end, without ruth or recrimination. To forgive myself as others have forgiven me. To enjoy the birds with little bones at the farmer's market. I still see his truck from time to time. Notices on utility poles for a lost dog answering to Scout. Sometimes I sit in a cafe pretending to read, but knowing I want to be the one to find Scout instead. I do what I have done. I wake up and join the struggle of the trees to find a way through, and then a dark clot of poetry breaks off. So as you already know, well, give that one a little breathing space. Sorry. As you already know, Copper Canyon is a nonprofit, and we depend upon your support in order to make our books. We're here to celebrate C.D. Wright, and we're also here to raise money for Copper Canyon. This essential series is part of Copper Canyon's commitment to supporting the legacies of poets who've laid the foundation for new and continuing generations of poets. If you just look at a list of the poets who we've included in the essential series, they include W.S. Merwin, June Jordan, Ruth Stone, Jim Harrison, and now C.D. Wright. Each of these were, like C.D., iconoclasts who pushed the boundaries and dedicated themselves to challenging the orthodoxy of the status quo. Each are essential to the success and longevity of Copper Canyon. And in supporting this book, or any book for that matter, you're supporting the much larger project that is Copper Canyon Press. You're supporting an organization that recognizes that poetry is always at the forefront of change, that our poets are the angels who guide us through what is often a challenging and beautiful world. So I guess I want to invite our poets, our guests back onto the screen, and maybe we can have a few questions. And starting with maybe we'll go in the opposite order. And I'm glad to see Brenda. You're alive and moving. Yay. Um, so maybe I'll start with how about I start with Forrest and go in the opposite order here and ask you, what you see as essential in CD's work, and how has it changed your own work, your own life as a poet?
I,
Hmm.
I,
Big one,
I
huh?
don't, yeah, I don't know whether I'd have a life as a poet. She shaped all of me, and she certainly, our conversations about poetry are what defined our beings. But her work, when I think about, for instance, documentary poetics, um, and some of the important books that I think about, Mark Nowak's Shut Up, Shut Down, and his Coal Mountain Elementary came out in 2008 and 2009. And M. Norbese Phillips' Zong came out in 2011, and Claudia Rankin's Citizen in 2014. And recently some great new documentary books, including the Copper Canyon's Paisley Rekdal. And CD didn't invent documentary poetics, of course. There are lots of recent precedents, including like Muriel Rukeyser's The Book of the Dead, Charles Reznikov's Testimony, Teresa Hatkamcha's Dictée, Kamal Brathwaite's Trenchtown Rock, Bernadette Meyer's Midsummer's Day, Carlos Williams Patterson. But between 2008 and now, there's been a noted surge in documentary poems in the US, and most of them are influenced, I think, by CD's work. Nowak's book comes out 2008, Claudia's in 2014, but CD Wright's Deep Step Comes Shining, which is a documentary road trip through the South, came out in 1998. And One Big Self, documenting the penal system in Louisiana, came out in 2003 and then was reprinted by Copper Canyon in 2007. Oh, you've got both editions, Michael. Rising, Falling, and Hovering, documenting the U.S. war in Iraq as it was covered in Mexico, came out in 2008. One with Others, documenting one woman's involvement in the 1960s struggle for racial equality in Arkansas, came out in 2010. I think there haven't been any books that have come out since in the 2000s that are considered documentary poetics that haven't been influenced by CD.
Thank you. I'd love to, Brenda, hear you talk a little bit about what's essential, but also wanted to kind of touch upon your friendship. And friendship seemed to be such a part of so many of her works, including her collaborations. And I'm just wondering, what her friendship meant to your poems, and how were you in collaboration with her?
That's a great question. We talked a little bit about, and Forrest just articulated documentary poetics, but I think even in a larger sense, I made a list of of things that her poetry was doing, and things that I was interested in. At the same time, we just found ourselves at a particular moment in women's poetry and in feminist poetics, that was particularly challenging, just because the interest in abstraction and concrete descriptive lyricism was in some way a kind of opening, burgeoning excitement, starting in the mid-'80s, really. And so experiments, one thing that Forrest mentioned, experiments with genre, of mixing prose and the line, that was interesting. Her love of words and language and the textures of language. And we haven't mentioned this book yet, but this is a really fantastic book. The title is too long to read, but I was going to read a piece that she wrote about Jane Miller, because as Forrest and Arthur noted, she was great at being a friend and a literary champion of what she loved, with no residue and with no BS. Forrest and I talk so much about the way that she wove tones in her writing in our class, and the fact that she was able to hold the sort of mighty paradox of human suffering and still be and wit at the same time, that you could be absurd and ironic and be as dark-hearted as possible. Other things, calibrating the abstract and the concrete, celebrating other writers, describing human experience. She wasn't, one way that we were very different. She wasn't that interested in sort of metaphysical reality, which sort of obsesses me. But we would sort of argue about the afterlife, and and have these things like, I'm going to talk to you if you go first. I'm going to talk to you, and if I go first, I'm going to send messages. And she'd say, well, I don't know about that, So anyway, experiments with the genre, with just the way she loved words and individual words. And in the poet, The Lion Talking Pictures, she talks about love of individual words, and how she goes into the individual love of words. The universal and the local, I guess that maybe the top thing for me is just how she was able to characterize particular human conditions and scenes and be magnificently and make universal statements about human reality from the very local, from her local experience. And that seemed, there's probably 50 more things that I could list. In fact, I have a list of 25. But anyway, I'll let Arthur go on. One more thing I want to say about friendship. Literary world is so full of impossible, I won't use bad words, but impossible BS. Like, it's really hard. It's really hard to have literary friends who wish you well. And there was no guile in her in that way. Like, what she loved, and she supported, and she let you know it. And that was really refreshing. There was no like secret agenda that, something was going on in the back that she didn't say. So that was really a great thing to have a friend like that. And, we had a friendship that was permanent.
That's beautiful. And even looking through the people who are online, I'm seeing, collaborators and friends like Denny Moores. Hello, Denny out there, who is a part of a number of her books, and students of hers and other friends. And I think that, we all share in that. Something you said about her work, I think also, obtains to Arthur's work, and that she had this, I think you said a particular, she was able to capture particular human conditions, and see in them the universal from her locale. And I see that a lot in your work, Arthur. But I'm hoping, one, you might talk a little bit about your friendship and what you see as essential to her work, as well as, before I was lucky to work with you, you worked with her and Forrest, when they published you at Lost Roads in River River. And so what was it like to be edited by her?
So yes, it was Forrest who wrote me out of the blue when I was teaching at the Institute of American Indian Arts. That was maybe 1985, 86. River River came out in 1987. So I worked with Forrest and C.D. together on that book, and we became really good friends over many, many years. There are so many things running through my head. I guess one of the things I want to start with is, just as a poet, C.D., as a person and as a poet, means so much to me, because I think of the word courage. Irregardless of whatever might be trendy or popular, she always was writing from her deepest self. Forrest mentioned the series of poetry books that are certainly very important. In One Big Self, the one thing that really amazes me is, as someone who also taught a poetry workshop at the Penitentiary of New Mexico, as someone who went into the prisons, C.D. was never judgmental, never didactic. She was always open, human, vulnerable. The thing that astonishes me about that book is how human the people are inside of prison, and their stories and their vulnerabilities are revealed, and it becomes so powerful. C.D. as a teacher was amazingly generous, as Forrest said. I invited C.D. and Forrest to the Institute of American Indian Arts when I was the director of the creative writing program there, and I always felt badly in those years. I didn't have a lot of money, but I brought poets in, and they not only did readings and visited classes, but because it was so important for Native students who were very shy, I set up individual conferences where a visiting poet would come and maybe meet individually with student after student after student. And other poets could have said, that's not for me. I'm not interested in that. And CD and Forrest were so generous with their time. And I remember CD at the end of the week saying, Arthur, I am just exhausted. I am really exhausted. But she gave so much of herself. And her friendship just meant so much to me, like Brenda's. I felt it was, whether I saw her or not, it was, I always felt like this was a secure, meaningful, true friendship that was going to last a lifetime. And I felt inspired by her work. I hope she felt the same with mine, but I felt like we helped each other grow through conversation. And yeah, I'll stop there.
I feel exactly the same way about her friendship, and I felt like we didn't really publish her as so much as collaborate with her and scheme and had a hell of a lot of fun. But so I've got a final little treat to share with everyone. So we've made a little video featuring CD here at the end. I want to, before we go to the video, of course, thank the three of you and thank everybody out there. We'll go to the video here and then come back to sign off. So please.
Dear prisoner, I too love faces, hands, the circumference of the oaks. I confess to nothing you could use in a court of law. I found that sickly sweet ambrosia of hope, unmendable sane of sadness, experience taken away from you. I would open the mystery of your birth to you. I know we can change, knowing full well, knowing it is not enough. Poetry, time, space, death. I thought I could write an exculpatory note. I cannot. Yes, it is bitter, every bit of it bitter. The course taken by blood, all thinking deceives us. Lead kindly, light, notwithstanding this grave, your garden, this cell, your dwelling, who is unaccountably free. Happiness in pursuit thereof. It is 2005, just before landfall. Here I am, a labyrinth, and I am a mess. I am located at the corner of Waterway and Bluff. I need your help. You will find me to the left of the graveyard, where the trees grow especially talkative at night, where fog and alcohol rub off the edge. We burn to make one another sing, to stay the lake that it not boil, earth not rock. We are running on Aztec time, fifth and final cycle. eyes switch on, off. We would be mercurochrome to one another, glass and spandex. We should be digital, or at least early, be ivory billed, invisible, except to the most prepared observer. We will be stardust, ancient tailings of nothing, a lapsed breath. No, we must first be ice, be nails, be teeth, be lightning.
If you can all come back on quickly, again, I just want to thank you all and for celebrating CD with us tonight. It's a beautiful way to end. And again, I'd like to remind everybody that they can go to our links that we provided to make a donation to this project and to Copper Canyon Press. So thank you all, and I look forward to sharing her work with you in the coming weeks and months. Good night.